Hi, thanks for the intro. Hello to everyone, wherever you happen to be. I'm joining you today from Detroit, Michigan, on my travels. So today I'm going to talk a bit about technology agility, DevOps between silos. And really what happens when you have a DevOps team in an environment that has traditionally had very siloed and very controlled structures around the rest of the organization. So a little bit about me. As was mentioned, I am a consultant at OpsCode. I've been to VelocityConf, all of the conferences in Santa Clara, and this year will be our kickoff for New York City. I'm looking forward to that. Traditionally, I've been a systems administrator, so I spent a number of years running systems for various people. And now I am super interested in DevOps and how that can help businesses get their products out faster and improve their overall chances of success. So over the past few years, we've heard a lot about DevOps, how to arrange your DevOps teams, how to integrate development teams with operations teams, to work towards better sort of product success and coordination. So some of those things are changing the way our applications become part of our business. We can allow our development teams to be more aware of metrics, participate more in monitoring, have a better relationship with how their code becomes part of the business, be more integrated with sort of day-to-day operational tasks, making sure the system is running correctly, making sure everything is behaving appropriately, all those sorts of things that make a better product for our customers. For operations practitioners, we've seen that we can get help to scale more efficiently. We get better data when we are able to have a better relationship with the development team, and we can participate in more constructive activities rather than constantly being under the 8 ball of worrying about outages and things like that caused by code that hasn't been prepped for production. So we hope that over time these sorts of relationships evolve to provide better pathway to success for the products that are being built. But our main development team and our primary operations team, our systems administrators, aren't the only people that are involved, even on the technology side of the house. In large organizations, it's not uncommon to have other technical roles that are managed by separate parts of the organization. So even in small organizations, it's not uncommon to have a separate QA team that may or may not even report into the software engineering organization. They may have their own set of directors. They may have their own teams they work in. They may not even be always assigned to the same projects from day to day. As organizations grow, you end up having more and more specialists that provide very special services so that you can leverage their specific knowledge about their area, right? So you end up with folks that are really good at database operations. They become professional DBAs, and they may not be assigned to one specific project for the life of their career, right? So they'll work with multiple teams over time. Same with folks that work closer to the hardware. So data center operations, your network engineers, storage engineers, those folks whose knowledge is wrapped up in how to efficiently and effectively manage all of the hardware resources that are needed to support all of our products. These folks have very special knowledge, and we need their services as our products get larger over time and become more complex. We require them to have all this additional knowledge. Part of that specialization, though, usually leads to them being part of their own team, and it's not unusual then to start to silo all of our technical teams, right? So there's conversations in sort of, if you follow DevOps folks on Twitter or whatever the case might be, occasionally we talk about silos and how good or bad a silo might be for your particular organization. These separated teams are created for a reason, right? So we've expected a certain number of people in our organization to have specialized skills. Maybe we've sent them to training. Maybe they are the people who have special relationships with our vendors. They're the ones that are speccing out what our requirements are for new hardware, when we do upgrades, all of those things that are very important tasks, and they kind of keep them separated from the actual teams that build and run our products. So we're asking them to provide a higher quality of service, but we also want them to not miss out on what we actually need to have done for our products to be successful. So it's unfortunately easy to claim that siloed teams are a bad idea. From a certain standpoint, that can end up being true, but we have to rely on our executive management to be able to communicate the project goals that we have for all of our products so that all the teams can be focused on the goals. It's super easy for specialized people to focus on the details of their area that they find interesting. And while that's awesome, everybody wants to work with the stuff they find interesting, sometimes those things don't lead to the best solution for our products. Over time, you may end up with a team that becomes what we call functional fanatics. So these folks lose sight of our product goals, right? So they're down in the weeds. They're doing some really awesome stuff with a particular piece of hardware or a process that they're super proud of and works really well. And they identify more with those processes than with the organization and its products. They end up finding compromising on their particular focus area to be super difficult, and that's really unfortunate. We want to be able to engage these folks in doing the right thing for the product and not necessarily what they feel is the absolute right way to interact with their particular subsystem. So if you find folks that have almost a zealous dedication to their domain of knowledge, and they will end up insist on implementing solutions that they believe are absolutely the most correct. They may not even come close to meeting what you actually need to get your products done. In some organizations, this is more likely than others. Organizations in themselves are messy. They're made up of people, right? And I love this cartoon. It appears on tech blogs from time to time, but it's sort of a facetious look at just how organizations end up being put together over time and certain characteristics that become inherent in those organizations. So some organizations are totally better at sharing and coordinating goals and responsibilities across different teams. Others are not so good at sharing all of these sorts of information and responsibilities. Sometimes it's challenging and not even don't even actually have a chance of being successful as sort of grassroots or Skunk Works projects that are sort of the crux of how DevOps has come into existence in a lot of organizations. So you end up with buy-in being super important, and if you're looking to integrate some things like Agile processes with your support services, your security team, your storage team, all these other folks, you have to make sure that functionality and that sort of personality can be pushed down into those teams, even if the rest of the organization isn't really the same behavior. So over time, we've seen in a lot of large organizations that Agile processes and DevOps in particular sort of started out as Skunk Works projects, right? So someone decided that they wanted to do this, and so they took their team out into the wild and started doing some implementation. So things like our big example being sort of data center operations. It's not unusual these days to find in a large organization that somebody somewhere has put some project in the cloud, even if nobody knows about it and nobody has approved it, right? So system procurement, racking, cabling, all those kinds of things, they come as a cost to the product, right? And we don't often see that. In sort of business parlance, you call this your opportunity cost, right? You are losing time that you could be putting that product out there in front of people's faces, and instead you're waiting for provisioning, or you're waiting for some other service to be ready so that you can put your product out. The development and operations teams have deadlines that report back to the product team. It's super easy for product managers to be in the face of their software engineers, operations folks. They interact with them every day, and often those folks are dedicated to a particular project. The secondary support teams in large organizations often don't have that interface with the product team, right? So they don't know what the product schedule looks like, and unfortunately sort of end up being blindsided when a new requirement comes along to say, you know, this project's launching, it needs this, that, and the other thing, and they don't have that ready. So what do? Some folks will escalate and force the teams to scramble around at the last minute and put a bunch of stuff together to get the product out. Other folks have gone and taken the tack that they're going to go to the cloud, and they push their products out into commercial providers with or without the blessing of internal IT. So communication is important, right? So you need your executive teams to message to everyone in the organization what the organization's actual goals are, right? So we have it's not unusual to have our pointy-haired bosses tell us on one hand to get something done, get it ready, have this deadline, but at the same time say don't use the cloud, don't use these other IT services, those sorts of things. So the problems start to emerge with how you manage the goals of the business and the internal controls that are set up in a lot of IT shops. The right way that your team wants things done, that needs to be done, that meets the corporate requirements, should be the easiest way for things to be accomplished in your organization. And many times this is not the case. It's not even close. The easiest way to get something done is to do an end run around the guys who are paying attention and do something completely out on your own. And unfortunately, that is a good way to get fired or be to otherwise be punished. We want to be able to facilitate good product practice. We want our products to represent, you know, what's best about our whole organization. So things that can help you mitigate working from sort of a DevOps side of the house. So if you're in an operations team or development team that's already sort of working cohesively with its partner teams, getting the products out, you have your sort of process in place, but you're still reliant on the other services internally. How can we work with those folks to sort of help us get products out in the correct way, right, that meets everybody's business needs, meets our SLAs from the product, but also helps everyone else be on board with all of our goals? So a couple of things to think about. One is capability maturity models. And these get published primarily for software engineering, but the goal of a capability maturity model can apply to all of your workflows when you're working on IT processes, right? So you sort of have a breakdown of the maturity of how you put your subsystems together, regardless of whether it is your software or the way you build your infrastructure or how you procure and provision storage or networks or any of those sorts of things, so you can build up a more repeatable, reliable model, right? So the pieces of a capability maturity model have several steps, right? The first one, you sort of start at the initial level. There's some kind of hand coding. You have artisanal, home-baked servers and configurations. Every time you look for additional pieces of storage, it has to be hand provisioned and set aside specially for you. Same with sort of networking configurations. Everything is related back to this one particular instance in time where someone asked me, you know, what IP address can I have? And I've gone in and I've marked that off by hand. Those things don't scale, and it's very hard for those teams to facilitate product teams working in fast-paced environments, in sort of coordinated, agile processes to be able to keep up with the demands that are being made on them. It's very frustrating. So maturing everyone else's process helps to facilitate that. So after initial, we have repeatable. There's at least some documentation. If they follow it closely, someone else can sort of pick up where the process was left off and continue on to the next one. After that, we have a defined process. It's a standard, and everyone is doing it the same way. Eventually, you get into managed and optimizing, where things are quantitatively assessed. You know that they're working correctly. They've been automated, and as much of the human error potential has been taken out of those processes. So you're searching for the ability to service everyone who needs your capabilities as efficiently and as correctly as possible. Not all team workflows mature at the same rate. Some tools that are used by certain teams might have specific hurdles in them around, the interface to this piece of hardware is a GUI, and we have to click on it, and it doesn't allow us to automate things, or we can't put an API in front of it, whatever the case might be. So over time, you want to push everyone sort of towards this maturation, but not everybody's going to get there at the same pace. One of the things you can do is sort of borrow the frontrunners from what is being provided by infrastructure as a service teams, right? So you're not calling someone up at your infrastructure as a service provider and asking them to provision some storage for you. There's an API. You query the API. You request a new service. The computers do all the work and spit things back out for you. Over time, as your processes internally mature, those sorts of goals that you can simply request what you need are an excellent way to sort of build trust, improve your reliability, and smooth out all of your product team requests so that everybody's getting what they need in a timely manner. We can automate these things. We start with sort of standard services, right? So when you have an initial process, when everyone's doing handcrafted requests and you're asking for very specific things that are related only to your product and only to what you're doing today, it makes it very, very hard to automate. When you have standard services, though, you can really start to optimize around the things that you are providing. I can't request any random configuration from my internet infrastructure as a service provider. I can pick from a certain catalog of standard services that are repeatable, are predictable, and I know how they're going to work in my project. The same thing can be done internally when you're working with other support teams in your organization. If you limit the amount of customization the product teams have for your development project, publicize the rules so that everyone knows that, yes, we're not allowing sticky cookies on the load balancers or any of those kinds of things that would require special handcrafting, then we can start to pre-approve certain types of requests that meet standard criteria and really smooth out and speed up the SLAs for these services. Keeping pathways open for custom requests is important in case there is something that's special, it's a new product, we want to do this thing that's a beta feature or something brand new and special and awesome. We should be able to request that special, but doing the right thing or keeping your requirements inside the sort of catalog of standard services allows you to manipulate your process and sort of keep your project on your own schedule and rely less on escalating or badgering other technicians for work that they're doing. So over time, you can automate when it makes sense. Your domain expertise in your local teams can be useful for building your own tools. You're going to repurpose your humans for high-value activities. So if you're putting tickets in and the human being is going in and opening firewall rules for you, that's something that can be automated once you have a trustworthy process that's been documented and is repeatable. And your human beings can be looking towards the next version of the firewall software. It can be doing more thinking activities rather than rote configuration. As teams gain confidence in all your standard services, You can automate all those implementations. The next revision of the software team's products is going to be geared towards that service catalog that they know will get them what they want faster. And you can send your domain experts out into the world, right? So they become, a vector for building relationships, for talking to product teams about their requirements, for making sure that they are providing a service that has value to the internal team. So when it comes time for the next product to launch, no one is asking that we go to the cloud because we can't get what we need out of our ancillary teams. We're getting exactly what we want. We know up front that they're going to be able to provide us with this service because we've been talking to them the entire time. So we start facilitating all of these more healthy relationships rather than just ticket queues or whatever the case might be there. So then we can start to optimize our SLAs, right? So our supporting technology teams can help us be successful with our products and get everything out that we need to. Unfortunately, right now, it's not unusual to have sort of product teams that are running towards a 2-week sprint, and when they get ready to launch their product, it's 1 week or maybe even longer to get their new domain name for their product. And that's a real impedance mismatch, right? So our product teams are working towards all these great things. We want them to be able to get that in front of our customers, and then there's a roadblock for waiting for approval just to get a subdomain associated with their project. We can slim our SLAs down for common tasks, right? So if we've got automation, we have some APIs available, we can say, all right, well, this still needs a human being to approve it, but we'll be able to do it in 24 hours because you're doing the exact same thing that we asked you to make sure that you do. You've followed the rules, you've done the easy path, and have taken the service out of the service catalog, and we'll go ahead and approve you in a slimmer timeline than we would otherwise. So we keep our teams in line by rewarding them with fast turnaround so that they're willing and enthusiastic about following our rules, right? Then we can educate our masses, right? Specialists help our product teams keep their projects in the guidelines. So we can talk to the developers about what firewall requests are valid, what's going to be necessary to meet particular requirements of their next product revision, what sort of stored procedures or permissions we allow in the databases, rather than waiting until the development lifecycle has gotten to a launch state and is ready to push to production, and then find out that all of the things that all the assumptions that were made previously aren't actually going to work. So you can start freeing up the time of your specialists from these sort of rote and basic procedures and push their information, their knowledge out into the world to sort of short-circuit all of those problems that would have happened down the line. And as your sophistication grows for things like this, it's cool to have a few wizards, right? So some senior people that have special privileges. They're allowed to maybe have some additional permissions on a particular API. They're allowed to create additional resources. Maybe they have a special things in the service catalog that they're allowed to deploy because they've been trained. We know that they understand the consequences of the changes that they're going to make, and if they make a mess or they screw something up, they're not going to be expecting someone else to clean up their mess, right? So that one is sort of rights and responsibilities, right? You give people privileges. You expect them to behave in a responsible manner and do what's best for the team and for the services they're working with. And over time, you're going to be building these relationships in a more supportive and constructive manner, right? You're no longer working up against hurdles as you sort of mitigate these sort of old-fashioned IT relationships with better processes and better goal setting. You can sort of reach out to folks who are maybe reluctant to participate. You don't want your frustration with them to sort of rule your relationship and ruin the reputation of your project internally with the other support teams. As it's not unusual for folks to say, we wanted to have this particular service available in our product, but working with that team is horrible, and we decided to go with another solution so that we've outsourced from them. We're no longer taking their services. So save your complexity for when it's absolutely necessary, working around sort of obstinate teams, but try and be as open-minded as possible with the folks that you may be having some trouble with. So this is a quick one. In conclusion, if silos exist in your organization, it's important to sort of determine the reason. Are they there for specialized knowledge? Are they there to maintain vendor relationships? Are they there to sort of keep people with certain skills in a pathway that allows them, maybe for HR reporting, it allows them to say, well, this is what a senior systems administrator means on the storage team, and it's not exactly the same as a senior systems administrator on the web services team. So there may be HR reasons for dividing teams up. You want to work with your other teams, whoever they are, whatever services they provide, to find your common goals. You may have to ask your executive leadership to sort of redefine or be more explicit with what your actual goals are, what sort of priorities are for your business, so that you can sort of use that as a guideline for facilitating other projects, right? Be willing to compromise, find your least common denominator features that your products need. If you're really frustrated and you're ready to go to the cloud, you're not going to get your specialized requirements out of an infrastructure as a service provider. So if you're frustrated with your internal teams, compromise on what you need, right, and try and focus on what they can provide to you that's going to meet your needs without a lot of bloodshed. And over time, it will improve, right? It's an iterative process. You start with maybe one team that's providing the service and help them sort of mature their processes, get something more repeatable, more reliable, and over time that's going to improve other stuff too. So uptime, reliability, scalability, all those things sort of fall out of having a more mature process and being able to manage towards what those sort of goals are, as long as you have the product goals in mind. So that's what I have for you today. I see the Q&A button is red. Well, I can flip over there. All right, so Mike F. wants to know, don't silos grow naturally with company growth? And often they do, absolutely. You will see not only in technology, right, but also in accounting, right? Once you get to a certain point, you'll have accounts receivable, accounts payable. You'll have different teams with different areas of expertise. And how those teams and how those silos that sort of naturally develop, how they interact is very much a function of your company culture. And some companies are super good at facilitating good relationships between different silos. Other places, the silo is definitely made of concrete, right? They're not talking to each other. If you need to interact, it's through an obtuse ticketing system maybe. The folks maybe sit in a different part of the world. You never see them. You don't have a chance to interact with them and actually form a relationship. And those sorts of damaging or not exactly helpful silos can end up really hindering processes when you're trying to move towards more integrated DevOps, collegial relationships for dev and software. Let's see. Next question. Jerome would like to know, do you have experience with offshore teams, and can you talk about how to incorporate? So offshore teams are an interesting experience as well, right? So when you're talking about folks who don't necessarily share your same personal culture, it becomes super important to rely on your corporate culture to facilitate those good relationships. Sometimes it's hard there too because of time differences and language barriers, those sorts of things. And you really have to rely on your managers to keep the barriers sort of as low as possible between those sorts of teams. Particularly if you're doing things like follow the sun, where you have folks around the world on every team, having repeatable processes, having APIs, having a service catalog that folks start to follow pretty rigorously allows you to have not just people from all over the world, but people with different capabilities that are able to sort of help with all of those teams and help all the other teams that rely on their services be successful. So the challenge to working with distributed teams, offshore teams, cross-cultural teams is really making sure that you have a strong manager, a strong leader to set those goals for that team and make sure that everyone who is working for the team is meeting those goals. So they're participating in the correct conversation, they have the ability to have positive relationships with other teams, and that they're able to understand and follow all of the guidelines that have been set by your team if it's sort of out-facing into the rest of your organization and providing a service. All right, I think that's the last question.
Okay, thank you so much, Mandi. We're just going to give folks just a moment here, folks. We are at Q&A if you joined us just a little bit late. If you do have a question for Mandi and what she's been talking to you about, please open your group chat widget, type it in, send it in so she can answer it while she's with us. And we'll give you folks a moment to see if you have any additional questions. As we wait, we would like to let you know just a couple things here. We did push out some codes to you all and some URLs in your group chat, so another reason to open it. We do have a free report that Mandi has written for our Radar division. It's Building a DevOps Culture. It's a free Radar report, and we gave you the URL so you can access that. Okay, looks like we have a couple more questions coming in here. Mike F. asks, how big should a team get before it splits?
Cool. That's an interesting question. Like I've heard software development teams sort of naturally gravitate to 6 to 10. Operations teams maybe a little bit bigger, depending on exactly what their responsibilities are, particularly because the more people you have in an ops team, the more people are going to be on call, right? Same now if your software development team is going to be on call. When you're talking about sort of other operations support folks, it kind of comes down to just how comfortable the manager is with the number of folks that are on the team. You don't want to have the team be too large because then the manager doesn't have time to actually talk to everyone, make sure that they are, comfortable and successful in their position. You want to make sure that, individually each team has sort of its optimal number of people on it so that you're not asking the manager to do too much, but at the same time the team isn't struggling to meet its requirements. And that's sort of it's one of those things you kind of have to experiment with, right? So it's very unusual to have, teams that are permanently assigned to be like 20 to 25 people in technical organizations because there's a lot of things going on. You see them break up a lot smaller than that so that, the manager can sort of take care of professional development and product goals with each individual and all those sorts of things. So I don't know that there's a real hard and fast guideline for how big a team should be. I would say that it would be ill-advised to make sort of a universal judgment across the entire organization that no team should be bigger than 7 people or anything like that. I think it varies by team and may vary by specialty. In my experience with administrators, you get to the point where you have like 6, 7 people on a team, and that's the sort of the time when things can get a little out of hand. So, I won't say that I know a universal answer on that one, but I see mostly like 6 to 10.
Great, thank you so much for that. And we do have a question from William who says, I find businesses can't spend money on tools and training. What can you suggest to do about that?
The universal question, right? So part of some additional research that I've done recently, I have another article for O'Reilly on the subject, that it's become part of our corporate culture, particularly in the United States, that we no longer support our employees getting professional training, which is incredibly unfortunate and is a super limiting factor for the success of our businesses. It's very tough to do, specifically around technology, and especially when you're trying to improve your processes with some of these modern workflows, right? So working towards agility, working towards DevOps, maybe not exclusively, but also towards having more flexible and reliable processes around your IT projects really requires folks to have some new skills, right? So things that weren't traditionally part of the toolkit are now sort of being expected. And we are seeing across the entire industry that it's been super hard to persuade businesses to sort of find the value in additional training for individuals and buying the correct tools for helping them towards being successful in these new processes. The interesting thing is that before the crash, right? So pre-2008, IT spending was still on the sort of pathway to do more with less. But there are products that were deployed before that time that were incredibly expensive, and they're still out there, right? Because you're talking about the sort of the relationship between buying something and then feeling sort of bound to it or emotionally attached to that decision. And there's some new research that's come out on the emotional impact of sunk costs and how that affects your decision making. That's been super fascinating, right? So sunk costs are gone, right? The idea that a gambler who's lost at a certain hand, puts money back in to try and make up his losses, right? That comes into play in IT spending as well. We bought the product, it doesn't quite meet our needs, but then we put people behind it, and we've done all this, spent all this money on this particular thing that doesn't do what we want it to do. It's super, super difficult to persuade management to abandon something that has been invested in so heavily. And over time that becomes more and more apparent, and in some places you get to a point where you just rip the Band-Aid off and off you go. It doesn't solve the problem with training. Training is a whole other ball of wax. We hope that there's some grassroots things coming up out of the community that will help on some of those things. In operations specifically, we've been looking at things like Ops School. Those folks have been working super hard on trying to put together a modern curriculum for helping systems administrators sort of mature in their professional development and help with that sort of vacuum in the space for more additional training. Unfortunately, I don't really see more organizations stepping up and saying, we want our folks to have these capabilities and we're willing to pay for it. Maybe as the economy continues to recover, we'll see more of that, but I kind of think that we won't.
Great. Thank you so much for answering that one. Just a couple more questions here. We have one from Sweatus. Do you know where we can find out about the software used to do some of the stuff like automatically provisioning servers and so forth? I realize this talk today is more people/management focused, but was wondering if you had any pointers.
So a couple things, right? So as far as provisioning servers and stuff like that, right, you have any number of, particularly if you're working towards a virtualized systems, there's any number of different vendors and open source providers of those sorts of tools, right? If you're working in virtualized environments, you can start to take a look at things like OpenStack or products provided by VMware and Microsoft and Cisco and other players in that space who have tools that are able to help you with provisioning. At the next layer, after the software is on the boxes, there's configuration management systems. I work for OpsCode. We write a configuration management system called Chef that can help you sort of automatically put software onto the system that you might need to meet your goals. If you're working sort of towards a more bare metal system, or you're not looking for a large commercial virtualization environment, that sort of thing, there's other stuff like Cobbler, Kickstart, and there's one for Windows. I don't remember what it is anymore. But those sorts of tools that are around that can be automated in different ways around whatever goal you might have for deploying your systems. And there's probably better people than me to ask on the internet, but those are the ones that come to mind off the top of my head.
Super. We'll take a final question here from Julio, who says he saw you in Chile last year when you visited there. He says, I found limits in automation dealing with network devices and the cloud. I mean, we don't own the devices, so I can't have all the security or monitoring I'd like. Do you think that policy should evolve to something more flexible?
Absolutely. I think over time you're going to see, and then it's probably in the next 18 to 24 months, we've got things coming on board for software-defined networking. I think there's already players in the space that are taking that to the next level and doing software-defined storage and those sorts of things. You're going to see an evolution there towards being more facilitative of the business and doing it in a manner that still provides the same amount of security and reliability, but sort of paring down to the essential required elements what I actually need out of that particular switch or out of that particular storage device. I want this block of storage. I want an IP address on this particular VLAN, sort of focusing in on the essential pieces that are needed to get the business requirements met and providing more services around facilitating that, those software-defined networking providers and all those sorts of things. That's a real hot topic. I think we're going to see a lot of talks on that at various conferences this year and next year as those things evolve. And to the exact point of sort of what we've been talking about, to get to the really efficient and effective Agile processes for putting products in front of customers.
Super. Oh, and it looks like one additional question just came in from Mike F. If you had one piece of advice to any company, Mandi, what would it be?
Oh, is that Mike Fiedler? Oh, my gosh. At this point, I don't know. I'm going to say I think it's time to abandon the do more with less sort of mantra that shops have been doing with their IT processes, because that has translated into, having far fewer employees that we're able to, grow internally and have a lot of expertise. It's translated into, skimping on the products that we buy for particular use cases, and that all trickles down into the quality of our products, right? We see it when, we're sitting there, we're waiting for a web page to load and it doesn't show up. We want to make sure that we're not skimping on the essential pieces that are going in front of our customers as more and more of our business gets conducted online. We have, we talk about the sort of digital generation and sort of internet native consumers are coming online. So over time, we definitely want to make sure that as our businesses evolve, we have that new customer base in our site. And part of that means focusing on how our technology grows, how our support teams are able to facilitate those products, and being more mature about how we think about getting these products out to our customers.
Fantastic. And with that, folks, we're going to say a very big thank you to Mandi for taking the time to be with us today and for presenting a really outstanding webcast for us and for sharing all her knowledge and expertise.
Right. Thanks very much.
Folks that attended, thank you so much for attending our webcast today. We hope you've benefited from it. And those of you that sent in your questions, thank you for sending those in, because having those questions just adds so much more to our events, and we really do appreciate it. As we wrap up here, just want to let you know one more time that we did push out a URL to you all so you can get a copy of Mandi's report. It is free. Building a DevOps Culture, lots of good information there. As well, we do have our Velocity Conference coming up in June 18th through the 20th in Santa Clara, California. Pushed out a code to you all and a URL to save you on registration. If you like what you heard today, Mandi's going to be talking live. She'll be there in person. And if you're able to come and meet her, that would be great, and we'd love to see you there. Again, thank you, Mandi. Thank you, everyone. This will conclude our webcast today. Goodbye, everybody.